Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
So, welcome to the next lecture. As you have seen in the previous lecture that we talked about how coaching helps in improving performance, and in the process you have to identify what is the performance standards, how you are going to diagnose poor performance, right, and then you are based on that you are able to identify what needs to be done. Okay. So, you go through a process to ensure that it is done. And on that accounts we also discussed that when you are going to identify performance you are using certain standards. Okay. So, based on these standards, whether it is absolute or relative, you compare the performance, identify the gap in the performance. Okay. Another issue that we discussed that there could be certain behaviors which is made by the people which is not desired. Okay. They may engage in political activities, they may be working slowly. Okay. So, all kind of deviations are possible at the workplace. And if they are engaged in this kind of deviations, then what will happen? They would not be able to achieve the desired performance level. So, there are two things at hand. First, identify the level of performance and decide whether it is poor performance or not. Second thing, you also decide whether deviation is there and if this deviation is in what form. So, when you are going to consider the causes for poor performance, you look at the kind of behavior that is made by the employees and whether this behavior is related to poor performance or not. So, you also need to identify the deviances which is happening, which are more counterproductive in terms of behaviors, and if they are engaging in these kind of what you call counterproductive behaviors or deviant workplace behaviors which is not desirable, that would also lead to poor performance. Okay. And this kind of behavior could be done because there could be issues related to task performance or contextual performance. Okay. So, we need to ensure these kind of things, so that we can adopt a process for coaching and analyze the requirements and see what kind of techniques could be used to ensure that this coaching is going to help individual to perform very well. So, in this lecture we are going to talk about the process, and then we will discuss about the analysis part and the techniques. Now, you remember that the same HRD process is to be used, or the same learning and development intervention process is to be used when it comes to coaching, right. First, you need to identify the need for the coaching, then you are going to design and develop a program, then moving to the next part you are going to implement, and then you have a feedback system, and there could be certain constraints related to time, the situation that could act as a constraint. Situation means the environment, internal and external environment, and the context in which the performance happens, and then also the kind of activities that is being carried out by the individual, whether they are going to do goal directed behavior or not, right. If they engage in counterproductive behaviors, then it is not good, right. So, if you look at the coaching process as such, so it starts with what? Once you have been able to identify the need for coaching, it means that you identified that yes, there is a need for coaching, then you also decide what kind of coaching would be required, who needs coaching, right. So, this comes from what you know as coaching need analysis. And in coaching need analysis we also follow the same process, that is you look at task performance, contextual performance, both, right. Then you are looking at the individual, and then you are also looking at the what you call the situation or the context in which the person is going to perform, and then you also look at the requirement of the organization. So, you are going for an organizational analysis. So, task analysis, person analysis and the organization analysis, individual or the person. We go through the same process in identifying the requirement of the coaching, right. So, based on this you have identified the requirement of coaching. Okay. So, you identified what kind of coaching would be required, who needs coaching, right, and then you prioritize. So, when you are going to prioritize, you are going to decide which coaching activities to be taken first, which coaching activities could be taken up later. And when, in this process you decide that which activities to be taken first in the name of coaching, depending upon how relevant and significant its contribution to the performance of the organization is, right. So, the prioritization is done on the basis of the relevance and significance of that particular activity. Right, contribution, right. Okay. And this could be related to both the technical competencies and non-technical competencies, but mostly coaching is given in behavioral competencies as well as functional competencies also, or it could be in general management competencies. So, depending upon the requirement you decide whether the coaching is a solution or not. So, once you have done this coaching need analysis, okay, based on the task analysis, the performance analysis and the organization analysis. It means that what is the requirement of the organization to start with, right. Then look at the situation context in which he is performing, look at the individual in terms of his knowledge and skill base, and look at his performance, both task performance and contextual performance, right. Once this is done, then you move to the next stage, that you are going to design, that is the next stage, design and develop a coaching program. That is the second step in the process. Okay. So, when it comes to development of a coaching program, you decide about, okay, the title of the program, what for it is, then what is the objective of this program, who is the target audience, then you also identify the content that is to be delivered, okay, and how it is going to be delivered, the method to deliver. Okay. Since it is on the job training, so the method is on the job training, that is how it is to be delivered, right. Then you identify the coaches who is going to deliver the program, right. So, once coaches are identified, then they are going to see that how their matching are compatible with the coaches in terms of temperament, other characteristics, right. Then you also have a system to monitor the progress, follow it up, and finally, you are going to implement the coaching program, right. So, there are a number of steps that is involved in designing development of a coaching program, right. So, we go through this process to discuss it, and it talks about these kind of things. So, the idea here is that yes, you have to design these kind of programs, okay, and then you are going to look at both, you have a feedback system and you also have a constraints of time, situation and activities. Okay. Look at the coaching process as such now. You are going to set development goals, it means that what you want to achieve through this coaching. So, you have to specify the performance goals that need to be achieved. Then you are also going to identify the resources and what kind of your strategy is, then you are going to implement it. Then you are going to document and develop the behavior, and finally, you are giving feedback that whether the coaching is successful or not, right. So, this through this process you are going to design and develop a good program, and then see that whether it is going to be successful or not, right. So, this is the process that is adopted. Moving further, you have to also identify that what are the organizational activities to improve documentation of the performance, because when we are talking about the coaching process and you say that design and development is very very important. Design and development means that how are you going to design and develop a coaching program, right. For example, there is a need to improve the communication skills, say for example, of employees who are going to communicate in a different language. Okay. Suppose in a foreign language. So, they are being sent on a deputation to a different country and they need to learn the language in order to effectively communicate, right. And for that you are going to design and develop a program where they are going to learn to communicate effectively in a different language. So, the title of the program is learning the language. It could be Japanese, it could be French, it could be Chinese, right. For effective communication, so you are going to learn business communication in Chinese, that is the objective, and then you are going to have a coach who is going to tell you that okay, how are you going to communicate, which includes both verbal behavior and non-verbal behavior, okay, because you also need to learn how are you going to communicate not only verbally, but non-verbally. So, the content would include both the verbal behavior as well as non-verbal behavior, right. Next, you are going to identify a coach who could teach them the language, okay, who also understands the business, have a good business knowledge about the China, so that he can communicate what kind of behavior is accepted, what kind of behavior is not accepted, and then he would engage them in classes. He will ask them to communicate and then he is recording those things, then he is replaying back and then you are going to observe it and then he say that okay, no, this is to be done in this way. So, he performs it himself and then you are going to emulate it through observations and then you are going to see that you are going to able to learn that, okay, and improve on your performance on that particular communication, right. That is a foreign language communication. So, the idea of this giving this example to explain you the process. So, you set the development goals, then you look at the resources and the development activities, right, then implement it, then you follow it up, give feedback how well they are doing, and then finally, you are going to evaluate it. So, what will happen if you are going to engage in these activities, you will be able to see whether the performance is going up or not. But in the process, documentation is very very important. At each and every level, you go for documentation, because that would help you to monitor the progress and you will be able to see whether the people is able to perform or not. Okay. So, what kind of organizational activities are required in order to improve the documentation of the performance, and why documentation is required? Because documentation helps you to when you go for review and analysis of the program, because now you are going to conduct the coaching program. After the coaching, you are going to evaluate it. So, you are going for some kind of review of the performance, you are going to analyze what are the factors which helped you to improve performance or what are the factors which did not help you. So, unless you have a written record of all of the observations that have been made by you, will not be in a position to do justice with this job, and that is why documentation is required, right. So, in order to document, you have to have good communication skills, that is very very important, right. So, you get managerial buy-in, so getting their confidence, okay. They should be convinced that yes, why it is required, why you want to go for documentations. So, you need to communicate effectively with your management and convince them that yes, documentation is required at each and every stage of the coaching program. Okay. Then those who are going to coach, they also need to be trained, that when they are going to evaluate the performance and when they are going to observe it, they are not going to be biased, right. So, we have already talked about these kind of things like rate error training, frame of reference training, behavioral observation training, because coaches are going to observe the behavior of the employees who are doing a particular job, right. For example, a baseball coach is going to see how are going to throw the ball, okay, and whether you are doing in a correct gesture and posture or not. So, and in order to observe these behaviors, he should be trained in these kind of behavior. So, he should know based on his knowledge, experience and his skill, he should be able to tell you whether you are following the correct process or not, right. And then he should have in confidence, and that is why we go for self leadership training. so that he will be able to image what is happening, is able to visualize the things, he able to identify the trend that is going on, right, and that is why self leadership is required. Okay. So, make sure that those who are going to work as coaches, because coaches are the evaluators here, you are not going to for a third party evaluation, right. The coaches are going to evaluate the performance at the first stage, whether you are able to perform well or not, and while performing you will be able to see whether they are able to perform well or not, and that is why it is different from training activities, right. While you get feedback from the coaches about their coaches with how well he is able to do his job, whether he is able to do justice with his job, but ultimately it is the coaches who are going to learn the process for perfect evaluation. So, you have to see that they understand what kind of errors may crop in the evaluation. So, they should be trained in rater errors, right, not going through the biases are not being very lenient or strict, are not following certain norms and behaviors which is accepted, right. So, the rater training program basically helps them to understand them better and what kind of errors can be made by the individual while evaluation happens. Then they should understand the frame of reference, why this kind of training is there, in what way it could be linked with the organization goals and objectives, and why it is required, right. And then they should be keen observers of the behavior. So, they should be trained in behavior observation also, and then they should have self confidence. Okay. They should believe in their ability that yes, they will be able to do it, and that is where self leadership training is very important. The idea is that as a coach you are able to minimize your cognitive biases, both cognitive biases and non cognitive biases. Similarly, you should be able to minimize both kind of errors, whether it is done intentionally by you or unintentionally. Okay. We talked about unintentional biases, but there could be a lot of intentional biases also, right. Despite their whatever their performance level is, when you say that everybody is good or bad, everybody is average, then you are making an intentional error, right. So, they should know that okay, what these are the different type of errors that can be made by the individual, and then how they can minimize it. So, training is very important for the coaches. So, they know how to evaluate correctly in spite of having good knowledge and experience, and they know their job very well. They also know that how they are going to evaluate the performance. Okay. So, that is where you talk about minimizing the cognitive load. Next factor is trust. In a coaching relationship, it is very much important that both the coach and coaches trust upon each other. Okay. And how this trust builds up, right. This trust builds up only when the coach and coaches try to understand each other very well. Okay. In this process, I can give example of a framework where you try to open up more and more, when you communicate more and more about yourself, okay, to the other person. So, the other person also communicates you more and more. Okay. It is something like this. When it talks about building trust and confidence, in a coaching relationship, right. So, when we are talking about building trust and confidence in a coaching relationship. So, two factors are important, trust and confidence, right. So, there is a coach and there is a coachee, right. So, look at self others. I am using this framework, okay, which is based on feedback. So, the system of feedback is very important. Okay. So, feedback means receiving and also feedback means giving feedback. Okay. So, when coaches give feedback and also receive feedback about their performance from the coaches, it means that they are engaged in what you call an open communication, they are more transparent, right, and objective in their assessment. If they are open, transparent and objective in the assessment of the performance and others, probably this would lead to what you call trust, building trust. Okay. So, and if that it is not happening, then there would be lack of trust. So, in a coaching relationship, building trust is very, very important. It depends upon giving and more feedback and also receiving feedback, and make sure that this feedback is constructive in nature. The idea is to help. Okay. So, in the process both the coaches and the coaches learn, and that is how you are able to develop a trusting relationship where the coach and coaches try to help each other, and the relationship is built on trust and they have confidence in each other. And if that happens, probably you are removing a major bottleneck in working together, and that is how it is going to help in improving the performance, and that is why we talk about these kind of things. Okay. So, it is very important that you develop trust, you make sure that it does not, they do not make any error. Okay. And if you are going for documentation, definitely you are safe, because if there is any queries later on, any kind of legal issues comes up, or say those who have performed well, or they think that their performance has not been evaluated properly, they file an RTI applications to know about their performance. So, you have all the documents ready with you to defend and protect your performance. Okay. So, it is very, very important that while this relationship is based on trust and confidence, you make sure that documentation happens at each and every level, so that you are safe, right. Moving further, we will see that how we go about documentation. So, when you are talking about documentation, make sure that you be specific, right to the point, use adjectives and verbs sparingly. You should not write should have done this, you should write okay, he is supposed to do this. Okay. So, you do not write these kind of things, because if you are using adjectives and adverbs, it means that you are talking about in a superlative form, so which is not good, right. Make sure that when you are going to document, you identify both the positive points and negative points. Okay. And make sure that whatever information is being documented, it is related to the not related to the individual's his temperament and characteristics and personality, but it is related to his job, right. Make sure that it is comprehensive, you follow standard processes in writing that, and you are going to describe the observable behavior. Okay. That is how he has performed, right, how the job has been done. So, you identify the competencies, indicators of the competencies, and if you have been able to identify the competencies and the indicators of the competencies, what happens? Look for those behaviors, see whether they are made or not, okay, and how they have contributed to the performance, and in that way you would be in a better position to document effectively, which could be used for the evaluation purpose. Feedback, that is what I have been talking about. Feedback is an important, or we can say the most important element in the process, because the entire system of coaching runs on feedback. For example, if you are telling as a sports coach, you are saying that okay, how are you going to throw a ball in a basketball, so that it goes to the net, right. So, what you are going to do? You are telling, you are asking him to do the job, and then you tell that okay, this is how you should do. It means, in the process of giving feedback, you tell him that how the job is to be done. That is one thing, and if he is able to do its job well, provided you give a constructive feedback, then it would help in building the confidence, okay, in the individual, because suppose he is following your methodology, okay, the style that you have asked him to adopt, and he is able to throw the ball in the basket, okay, and able to sustain that performance, what happens? He develops confidence. Okay. Yes, now I can do it, right. So, the idea is not only to develop the competence, but also build confidence. Okay. And if he is able to do it, or able to sustain it, probably it would create more engagement on the part of the individual to engage in these kind of sustainable activities to further improve his performance, right. And that is the major objective of providing feedback to the individuals, right. But if you are not able to provide feedback, what will happen? Neither he will be able to build confidence, he would lose interest in you, he will not be able to develop his competence, and he would feel disengaged, probably he will think that you are not helping him, you are not giving any feedback on how to do my job. So, that would be creating a very discouraging situation, which could be demotivating and demoralizing for the individual, right. So, the idea is that you facilitate this process to ensure that he is able to improve his performance. Okay. In some cases there is a problem, those who are not able to perform on a sustainable basis, they are known as chronic poor performers. So, in case of chronic poor performance, you have to think about your strategy, what need to be done, who despite being consistently coached and given feedback are not able to perform well. Okay. It means that in this case you need to decide whether you really want to continue with coaching or you want to ask them to go for some other kind of activity, because coaching may not be the solution. Okay. The coaching is going to help the individual only when he is motivated enough and has the skill and knowledge on how to perform the job, right. So, maybe he requires counseling or other kind of interventions, and coaching may not be solutions, right. Similarly, you have to see that employees are able to perceive about their performance accurately, because if they are able to not perceive accurately, and if they have an inaccurate perception about their performance, then it is not good. For example, if you have evaluated your subordinates and they think that you have not done it properly, or they have done well, but you have evaluated them wrongly, then what will happen? So, it means that somewhere the feedback system is not very effective, it did not work. So, make sure that feedback is given, and when it comes to giving feedback, the process of feedback, make sure that it is very frequently given, it is very specific, which could be observed, and it is given in a time frame, and be consistent while giving it feedback. Make sure that it is not given in public, but privately, because the individual might feel embarrassed when you are giving feedback about his performance, right. First you give a description and then you evaluate him. What I mean to say, you tell him that okay, this is how you have done it and this is how it should be done, right. And then you look at the pattern, whether it is going up or down in terms of its performance, and make sure that he believes in himself, he is able to develop confidence, because if the person is not able to develop confidence, nothing will happen, he will not be able to carry it forward or will not be able to perform even well, right. So, on the one side, make sure that you are telling him what to do, how to do, you also try to ensure that the employees also have their own idea on how to go about it, how to perform well. Okay. So, since it is a joint activity by the individual and the supervisor both. Okay. So, both generate ideas in order to see that what can be done best to improve performance. So, it is not one way feedback, okay, that where the employees are getting feedback from the supervisors, but supervisor also receive feedback on what needs to be done in order to perform well by them, right. So, when you have feedback sessions, this is how you should try to proceed further, like you are asking about how you are doing, okay, whether you are having resources to perform your job effectively or not, whether you have the skill and knowledge and attitude that is required, right. Have you been trained in this kind of activities earlier, okay, and what needs to be done to improve your performance in terms of job, products and services, whatever is related to your job is, right, and what way you can serve your customers, whether it is internal customers or external customers. For say for example, if you are in HR job, the employees are internal customers, but if you are in a sales job or marketing job, okay, you have external customers. So, the idea here is to identify that in what way you can perform your job very well. So, the answer should come from the employees, and during this feedback session make sure that they are neither defensive not aggressive. Okay. So, you need to make a balance and ensure that they are able to perform their job very well. Okay. Sometimes they are not able to do their job well. So, it makes sure that you are giving both positive feedback as well as negative feedback, right. So, because negative feedback have negative reactions and consequences from the employees, right, and that is why sometimes employees avoid it, right, and see what kind of negative experiences have been in the past, okay. And do not play God, you do not think that you are the father figure, you are going to destroy and make his career, right. Do not act like that, you are simply giving feedback on his performance as his immediate supervisor, right. and there that is where you are giving feedback about how well the person has been able to perform, right. And make sure that you have documented all kind of negative performance, so that you are able to take claims when you are saying that you have not done job very well, right. But it is more effective provided when the problem starts and then you give it, because once if you receive certain warning signs that okay, the person has deviated from the track, immediately then and there you start giving him certain advices, feedback, right. Make sure that he does not make unwanted behavior, make sure that he comes back to track. Okay. So, if you give regular feedback and tell him give him warning that okay, this is not the right thing to do, this is the counterproductive behavior in which you are engaged. Okay. So, probably the people will understand and try to see that they are able to perform well, okay, and they are able to focus on those behaviors which would improve his performance, right. Okay. And then make sure that when you are giving negative feedback is supported by the hard data, right. So, look at the coaching analysis steps, right. First you identify the poor performance and then see whether it really need to be addressed in terms of time and effort that you are putting in, right. Then make sure that they know that yes, their performance is not good, it is not satisfactory, right. And then subordinates also know that what needs to be done and what are the barriers that need to be removed, barriers which are under the control and which is beyond the control of the employees, right. And then the employees should know that okay, what needs to be done in order to improve their performance. Okay. What could be negative consequences if they are not improving their performance, like losing the jobs, withholding careers or promotions. So, these are the negative consequences which could follow, and what could be the positive consequences, reward, promotions, career growth, they are the positive consequences. Okay. And whether he knows how to do his job or not. So, when you are going for coaching analysis, make sure that you are able to identify the reasons for unsatisfactory performance, it is communicated well, identify those barriers which are beyond the control, okay, and make sure that they understand how the job is to be done, right. Coming to techniques, that is the last part. Let us see what happens, see how we coach them. So, there are 4 different examples, 5 different examples. So, facilitation is one way, right. You facilitate, in the process you tell them how to do it, okay. They are doing the job and then if they are not able to do it, you tell them how to do it. Okay. So, the best way to facilitate is demonstrating what to do, how to do it. Now, if you look at these 4 examples, okay, this will give an idea of performing different kind of activities or job. Okay. So, as a supervisor or as a coach, your responsibility is you need to tell employees how the job is to be performed. But before that you also need to ensure that whether they know how to do their job or not, and if they know how to do their job well, probably they will be able to perform very well, right. So, here we are going to discuss a model of coaching which is known as the GROW model, and it talks about 4 things, that is goal. So, identify your goal, look at your current reality means your strength and weaknesses, and see what are the options that you have, and well, that your commitment and dedication to the goal, right. So, basically if you look at this model, talks about whether individual understand what are their aspirations, what are their current situations, beliefs and confidence, what are the possibilities and resources that they have, and what kind of action they are required for achieving these goals, right. Moving further, now if you look at this, it talks about 4 things. You need to develop a very positive framework or attitude between the goal, reality, absence and wrap up, right. So, set your goals properly, make it very specific, right. Then next stage, go for your assessment, self assessment, right. Look at your knowledge and skill base, get feedback using 360 technique, right. So, that you understand your realities, then you see what are the options, right, what can be done, what are the options, choices which is available to you, and finally, you see that you are going to commit to the action. Okay. Ensure that goals are achieved and identify those obstacles which might hamper this. So, make sure that these are not available. So, that is how you will be able to identify your goal, assess yourself, look at what are the possibilities that you have, and ultimately you will be able to commit yourself to achieve these goals, right. So, that is what. Thank you very much.